Hello Star Wars fans, welcome to another ranking video. Today we have a really fun list. We're ranking all 19 new Jedi Order books from the worst to the best. Now, I absolutely adored this entire series. I'd say there's only a few books here that I genuinely didn't enjoy reading. Anyways, without further ado, let's rank and review. Starting at number 19, unfortunately something has to land in last place, and that for me is Force Heretic 2, Refugee by Sean Williams and Shane Dix. For me, this was the most filler, useless book of the entire series. As a pseudo-sequel to Truce at Bakura, I enjoyed all the connections and returning characters from that book, but the whole Bakura plotline felt so disconnected from the entire New Jedi Order storyline, and unfortunately it took center stage in this book. Other than that, we also have the continued search for Zonoma Sakat, which brings us to Scylla. Other than seeing the Fells, this was another fairly boring plotline as we spent most of the time in the library without much development or progress. The only real gem here was the Nomenor plotline, which is the one consistently excellent part of the Force Heretic trilogy. Moving on, at number 18, we have Dark Journey by Elaine Cunningham. Now, here's another example of a book that seems to care more about acting as a sequel to a Bantam-era book than a part of the New Jedi Order. This time, we return to Hapes, and most of the book is a courtship of Princess Leia type political story about the Hapens. What makes this especially egregious and frustrating is that this book is supposed to follow up the events of Starby Star, and it barely does that. We aren't even given any indication of what the galaxy and the New Republic looks like after the devastating defeat at Coruscant. The one thing this book does put an effort into doing is exploring Jaina's grief over the loss of her brothers. However, it definitely fell flat for me since it really just consisted of Jaina acting out of character and being unusually cruel toward her loved ones. So overall, this book failed to do anything of substance when it came to exploring a post-Starby Star galaxy, and rather just spent its time on boring Hapen politics. At number 17, we have Balance Point by Kathy Tyers. This is one of the 5 hardcover releases, along with Vector Prime, Starby Star, Destiny's Way, and the Unifying Force. But looking at what actually happens in this book, you wouldn't believe it. Almost nothing happens for about 75% of this book. They spent the first 200 or so pages on Duro doing nothing but helping refugees. There's a few action sequences here and there, and that's pretty much it. And don't even get me started on Jason, who's practically the main character of this book, and the way he's written is just so frustrating. The one generally positive thing I can say is that this book sticks the landing. This book introduces us to Savong Law. We have a great duel between him and Jason, a great final battle at Duro, and Savong Law's ultimatum was a really interesting way to end the book. But despite the good ending, the first 2/3 of this book are so anticlimactic and uneventful. Next, at number 16, we have Force Heretic 3, Reunion. This one is simply very forgettable to me, partly because this trilogy was just too damn drawn out, and at this point, I was just ready for it to be over. In this one, we finally reach Zonoma Sakat, which is cool. However, other than some fun little connections to Rogue Planet, this plotline was nothing special. The Esfandia plotline with Han and Leia was surprisingly fun, mainly because I really liked the planet of Esfandia, and then of course Nomenor's plotline was great as always. Overall, I have nothing seriously negative to say about this one, other than that it's very forgettable. At number 15 is Enemy Lines 2, Rebel Stand by Aaron Alston. It pains me to put an Alston book so low on the list, but to me this book felt extremely clumsy. Starting with the main Coruscant plotline, as much as I enjoyed the shenanigans with Lord Nyax, it did ultimately amount to nothing and was nothing more than some campy filler. Then there's the Borleas stuff, which felt like an afterthought, and finally the Han and Leia stuff was so utterly forgettable and boring, I can actually remember falling asleep at least twice trying to read this. Overall, despite some strengths, this book just felt very directionless and messy. It spent too long on filler and scrambled to wrap up the plotline that actually mattered, which was the Battle of Borleas. At number 14, we've got Agents of Chaos 2, Jedi Eclipse by James Luceno. Here's another one that feels all over the place. After a very character-driven, small-scale first book of the duology, which we'll get into in a bit, This one has a lot more going on, but none of it feels like it matters or gels together. We've got Han and Droma running around, Leia visiting the Hapens, Worth Skitter has a plotline as a Vong prisoner, Centerpoint Station shows up. A lot of things are happening, but they feel so disconnected from each other that the book as a whole feels forgettable. Not to mention that the actual content here is nothing to write home about. Other than a final cool battle at Fondor and some fun details like a possible Bollocks appearance, this book just falls a bit flat. Next at number 13 is Force Heretic 1, Remnant. This one marks a very big leap in quality. I actually really enjoyed this book. Now, it suffers from a few of the same issues as the other Force Heretic books suffered from, mainly the boring Han and Leia plotline and a lack of chapters, but the book is fun enough to make up for it. This is where the Nomenor plotline is at its strongest for me. I really enjoyed seeing him explore the underworld and stumble upon this little camp of shamed ones. And then the highlight of the book for me is the Imperial Remnant plotline. I had such a blast with this plotline. Seeing the New Republic and Empire collaborate was so fun, and Paleon is just a beast in this book. He literally commands a battle from inside a Bacta tank. It doesn't get much more badass than that. At number 12, we have Edge of Victory 2 Rebirth by Greg Keyes. This one is similar to Jedi Eclipse in that it feels like a lot of standalone stories lumped into the same book, but none of them really connect. The difference here is that the content is much more interesting. We have an excellent plotline with Anakin, Tahiri, and Corrin. We have a great battle with Jaina and Kip at Cernpadal. We get a whole Nen Yim storyline, and we're first introduced to Shimra and Onimi. We see the birth of Ben Skywalker. There's just so much to enjoy in this book, and although it feels a bit disconnected since there isn't some big battle or climax to bring it all together, it was still a really enjoyable read. At number 11, we've got Agents of Chaos 1, Hero's Trial. Whereas Book 2 of the duology felt very disconnected, like it was almost spread too thin, this one is very small scale and personal, only really following Han's adventures. And after a few books of him barely appearing, it was great to finally explore his grief over Chewie. And his adventures with Roa and Droma were a lot of fun. We also got introduced to the Peace Brigade and had a really fun plotline about the Vong, with Priestess Elan trying to assassinate some Jedi. And the final confrontation with her and Han was a super memorable moment for me. Next, at number 10, we have Starby Star by Troy Denning. A bit of a controversial book. Some people absolutely love this book and call it their favorite of the series and even all-time favorite EU book. Some people attribute this book to the beginning of the so-called Denning-verse. I'm right in the middle. I love some elements, I dislike some others. For me, conceptually, this book is phenomenal. The fall of Coruscant, the death of Anakin Solo, the Miracle Mission, Borsk Phalia's sacrifice, the Voxen. It's such a dark and epic and grand story. However, the execution and the writing is where my issues begin. Mainly, the book is just too damn long. There's a point in the middle of this book where it should have been split up into two books, where the Jedi are whooping the Vong's ass in battle, and one of the Jedi on the Miracle strike team dies, and that was a perfect point where the story could have been split into two books. The second issue, my main problem with the book, is Troy Denning's inability to write action. This book is chock full of so much action, and Denning can't write it to save his life. There wasn't a single battle or duel or fight scene that I managed to follow. The pace of his writing, his sense of geography, and his descriptions just made no sense, and it made the book really hard to read at times. Hell, even the Battle of Coruscant fell a bit flat because of this. At number 9, we have Dark Tide 1 Onslaught by Michael Stackpole. This is a book that has about half a dozen subplots that I really love. We have the Luke and Jason plotline returning to Belkadan, which gives us some fantastic action. We have Corrin and Ganner on a really entertaining mission to Bimiel. We have Mara and Anakin training on Dantooine. And of course we have the actual Battle of Dantooine itself, which is easily one of my favorite ground battles of the series. We also have Jaina joining Rogue Squadron, the introduction of Shadao Shai. This book has everything except some Yuuzhan Vong POV chapters, which is my only major issue with the book. At number 8, we have the book that started it all, Vector Prime by R.A. Salvatore. This book has its issues, but I think it did a fantastic job of introducing the series, the Vong, and the state of the galaxy. It starts a bit slow, with our heroes going on adventures very reminiscent of the Bantam era books, but very quickly things get dark when the Vong are introduced. I think R.A. Salvatore did an excellent job introducing and helping create this unique race of villains. There's a lot of heavy exposition work Salvatore had to do, not only introducing the Vong, but also their tech, bioweapons, ships, culture, and more. And I think he did a fantastic job. Salvatore also had the unenviable task of making Star Wars darker than it's ever been, and to do this he was given the burden of killing off an iconic character. Obviously spoilers for the book, but the way Salvatore wrote the death of Chewbacca was flawless. A lot of people complain and oversimplify Chewie having a moon thrown at him, but that scene was easily the highlight of the book and such a fitting end for his character. And it certainly did its job. It set the tone for the rest of the series, and it let us know that nobody is safe. So overall, ignoring some flaws, mainly the really strange Battle of Helska 4, this book was a great start to the series. Next, at number 7 is Enemy Lines 1, Rebel Dream by Aaron Alston. This was the book we needed right after Starby Star. This is the book that shows us the state of the galaxy after the fall of Coruscant. This is the book that properly showcases Jaina's grief after losing her brothers. This is everything Dark Journey should have been, and I wish that the plot of Dark Journey was rather a side plot of this book. This book follows the Battle of Borlaus, and the whole thing is a blast. Obviously, with Aaron Alston writing it, there is a ton of humor, action, and starfighter battles. We get some great stuff with Wedge, we see the return of the Lusankya. I just found this whole book a joy to read. At number 6, we have Dark Tide 2, Ruin by Michael Stackpole. While not as consistent as the first Dark Tide book, with weaker plotlines here and there like the Daishara Core plotline and the Battle of Garki, this book fully introduces Shadao Shai as a main antagonist, and he's one of my favorite Vong characters. His scenes with Elagos Akala were some of the best of the book, and the Battle of Ithor, specifically the duel between Shai and Corran, was such a fun and memorable moment in the entire series. Kicking off our top 5, we have Destiny's Way by Walter John Williams. This was such an eventful book. We have the New Republic restructuring into the Galactic Alliance, a new Chief of State, a new Jedi Council, the return of Admiral Akbar, and the Battle of Ebak 9 with the death of Savong Law. This is easily one of the most important books of the series, with it being the turning point of the entire war. And there were so many fantastic moments in this book, from the knighting of the Jedi from the Mirkor mission, to the duel between Jaina and Savong Law, to the death of Vergir. This book was just entertaining and eventful throughout. Next, at number 4, we have the penultimate book in the series, The Final Prophecy by Greg Keyes. This book has 2 plot lines, the first being the Battle of Bilbringi, which was super entertaining to read and had some really interesting tactics being employed by the New Republic. But the main plotline of this book is what makes it one of my favorites. We have the unlikely pairing of Corran Horn, Tahiri Vela, Nen Yim, Priest Harar, and Nomenor heading to Zenomasiko for different reasons. And the way these seemingly random, disconnected characters were paired together and sent on a road trip to the planet made for some fascinating discussions between the characters, centering on morality and religion and the nature of the war, and of course Nomenor at his absolute slimiest with him killing Nen Yim and sabotaging the entire planet. Overall, this was just such a well-written, short and sweet, but fascinating penultimate book of the series. At number 3, we have Edge of Victory 1, Conquest, also by Greg Keyes. Similarly to The Final Prophecy, this book has incredible character work, mostly for Anakin. This book takes place entirely on Yavin 4, one of my favorite planets in all of Star Wars, as Anakin and Tahiri try to save all the Jedi Padawans from the Vong. We get some great connections to Junior Jedi Knights, and we have a bunch of important plot progressions here, with the introduction of the Shamed Ones, as well as the Shapers Guild. We also have the fantastic characters of Nen Yim, Meijan Quad, and most importantly the shamed one Vua Rapung, whose sacrifice is still one of the best scenes of the entire series, and has lasting implications that last until the very end of the series. Anyways, once again, Greg Keyes gave us a phenomenal, fantastic, short and sweet book with great character work. Next at number 2, our runner-up is the series finale, The Unifying Force by James Luceno. This is the book where James Luceno did the impossible. The sheer amount of storylines, character arcs, and loose ends he had to tie up was immense, and he managed to execute it flawlessly. This book is a grand, massive conclusion to the series that manages to conclude the series in such a satisfying way. From the massive Battle of Coruscant, to the duel at Shimmer's Citadel, to the Onimi reveal, the whole book is so grand and epic, yet still feels so intimate and personal to our characters. Those final few pages cements this as one of, if not the greatest ending in all of Star Wars. But at number 1, you guessed it, we have Traitor by Matthew Stover. Where do I even begin? This book is a 4-person play involving Jason, Vergere, Nomenor, and Ganner. But despite the cast being so small and the scale being relatively grounded for a Star Wars book, Stover's writing made this feel like the grandest, most epic book of the entire saga. This is one of the only times where a Star Wars book transcends itself above simple science fiction. This is high art, this is literature. The way the Force and all of its facets are explored, the way Jason is tortured and transformed, Ganner's sacrifice, Vergere's teachings, this book is simply a masterpiece in every sense of the word. Anyways, that is my list. Thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And please leave your lists in the comments. I'd love to see how our opinions differ. Stay tuned for my next video where I'll be reviewing Darth Maul Shadowhunter. See ya.